Some days getting out of bed is the hardest thing in the world. Some days your own brain feels like your worst enemy. Some days nothing is okay, and nobody tells you how to survive those days. Until now. If this sounds like you, like this video, subscribe to Bookverse, and do not go anywhere. Chapter 1. You are not alone. Have you ever smiled at someone and said you were fine, when inside you were anything but fine? Have you ever looked at your to-do list and felt completely paralyzed? Not lazy, not tired, just completely, utterly frozen. Have you ever wondered why some days feel impossible, even when nothing is technically wrong? If any of that sounds familiar, this video is for you, and this book was written for you. Meet Jenny Lawson. Jenny Lawson is a New York Times best-selling author. She has written books that have made millions of people laugh. She runs a popular blog called the Bloggess. She owns an independent bookshop in San Antonio, Texas. She speaks on stages. She wins awards. From the outside, she looks like someone who has it all together. But here is the truth that Jenny shares right at the beginning of this book. She does not have it all together. Not even close. Jenny Lawson lives with treatment-resistant depression. That means the standard medications and standard treatments do not always work for her. Her depression does not respond the way most people's does. She also lives with severe anxiety, the kind that makes ordinary things feel impossible. Making a phone call, leaving the house, finishing a sentence. On the really bad days, even breathing feels like work. And she also has ADHD, which means her brain moves in 10 directions at once, which means focus is not always available when she needs it, which means she has had to find ways to work with her mind, instead of fighting against it. So how does she do it? This is the question people ask Jenny Lawson more than any other. How do you keep going when it feels impossible? How do you write books when some days you cannot get out of bed? How do you show up when your own brain is working against you? How do you stay creative when everything feels heavy? How do you keep going when nothing feels okay? Jenny says she has been asked this question so many times that she finally decided to write the answer down. Not in a polished, everything figured out kind of way, but honestly, messily, with humor, with real stories, and with more than 100 actual tools and tricks that she personally uses to keep herself going. That is this book. This is not a typical self-help book. Before we go further, it is important to say something. This is not a book that tells you to think positive. It is not a book that promises if you just try harder, everything will be fine. It is not written by someone who fixed themselves and is now looking down from a place of perfect wellness. Jenny Lawson is still in it. She still has bad days. She still has weeks where getting off the couch feels like climbing a mountain. She still struggles. And that is exactly why this book is different. Because she is not writing from the other side of the struggle. She is writing from inside it, right alongside you. And she is saying, here is what helps me. Here is what I do when my brain stops cooperating. Here is how I survive the days that feel unsurvivable. Maybe some of it will help you too. Who this book is for. Jenny is very clear about who she wrote this book for. It is for people who struggle with self-doubt. The kind that whispers you are not good enough, even when the evidence says otherwise. It is for people living with depression, the kind that does not always look sad from the outside, the kind that sometimes looks like being very busy, or very funny, or very productive, while quietly falling apart inside. It is for people dealing with anxiety, the kind that makes simple things feel complicated, the kind that turns ordinary moments into catastrophes, the kind that lives in the space between what is happening and what your brain convinces you is happening. It is for people with ADHD, whose focus disappears at exactly the wrong moment, whose best ideas arrive at 3 in the morning, whose brain was clearly not designed for a world built on deadlines. It is for people dealing with creative block, who feel the desire to make something, but cannot seem to start, or cannot seem to finish, or cannot seem to find the energy to care. And it is for anyone who has ever felt like everyone else seems to know how to do life, and somehow you missed the class where they explained it. The most important thing this book says, right at the beginning, before the tips and tricks, before the tools, before the 100+ ways to survive the hard days, Jenny Lawson says something that might be the most important thing in this entire book. She says, "You are not alone. Not alone in the struggle. Not alone in the confusion. Not alone in the bad days. Not alone in the feeling that you are somehow doing life wrong. Millions of people feel exactly what you feel. They sit where you sit. They lie awake like you lie awake. They cancel plans. They avoid calls. They push through things that should feel easy, and collapse from things that should not be a big deal. They are everywhere. You just cannot see them because, like you, they are very good at pretending everything is fine. This book is proof that you are not broken. You are not weak. You are not alone. You are just a person whose brain sometimes makes life harder than it needs to be. And there are ways to make it a little easier. That is what this book is about." This was part 1 of How to Be Okay When Nothing Is Okay by Jenny Lawson. In part 2, we are going to start with one of the most basic, but most powerful, tools in the entire book. Something your brain needs more than almost anything else, and something most people with anxiety and depression are not getting enough of. Part 2 is coming next, and it might just be the simplest life change you ever make. Chapter 2. Let me ask you something honest. When was the last time you got a genuinely good night of sleep? Not just closed your eyes. Not just lay in bed, scrolling until 2 in the morning. Not just passed out from exhaustion. A real, deep, restoring sleep. The kind where you wake up and your brain actually works. The kind where problems feel slightly less impossible. The kind where the world feels just a little bit lighter than it did the night before. If you cannot remember, that might be one of the most important things this video will tell you. The title that says everything. Jenny Lawson named this section, "Wash Your Brain More Than You Wash Your Bra." And if that title made you laugh, good. That is exactly what she intended. But underneath the humor is one of the most serious points in the entire book. We treat sleep like it is optional. Like it is a luxury we can skip when life gets busy. Like it is something we can borrow against and pay back later. But Jenny says, that is completely wrong. Sleep is not optional. Sleep is not a reward you get after being productive enough. Sleep is not something you earn. It is something your brain and body desperately need. every single night, to function like a human being. What actually happens when you skip sleep? Jenny Lawson does not just say sleep is important. She shows you exactly what happens when you do not get enough. And it is not pretty. When you are sleep deprived, your brain starts to misfire. Emotions feel bigger. Problems feel unsolvable. Small things feel like catastrophes. And if you already live with depression or anxiety, sleep deprivation does not just make things harder. It actively makes your mental health worse. Think about it this way. Your brain processes emotions during sleep. It sorts through the things that happen during the day. It files away the important stuff. It lets go of the things that do not need to be carried. It resets. But when you do not sleep, none of that processing happens. Everything from the day stays raw, unfiltered, right at the surface, and your brain starts the next day already overloaded, already overwhelmed, already behind, before anything has even happened yet. Jenny says when her sleep is bad, everything is worse. Her depression gets heavier. Her anxiety gets louder. Her ability to cope with even small challenges drops significantly. And when her sleep is good, not perfect, just good enough, everything gets slightly more manageable. Not fixed, not solved, but survivable. And sometimes survivable is enough. Jenny's own sleep struggles. Here is what makes this section feel so real. Jenny does not write like someone who figured out sleep and is now teaching you from above. She writes like someone who has fought sleep for most of her life, because she has. Depression, anxiety, and ADHD are all known to wreck sleep. Depression makes you want to stay in bed forever, but not actually sleep. Anxiety fills the quiet with noise. ADHD means your brain picks the exact moment you are trying to rest, to suddenly become the most creative and active it has been all day. Jenny knows this. She lives this. And she does not pretend there is a perfect solution that works every time. But she shares what helps, what she actually uses, what has made a real difference on the nights when sleep felt impossible. What Jenny actually does. Jenny is very practical in this section. She does not tell you to meditate for 40 minutes or do a complicated bedtime ritual. She talks about the small things, the real things, the things that actually work when your brain will not cooperate. She talks about keeping your sleep schedule as consistent as possible. Not perfect, consistent. Going to bed around the same time. Getting up around the same time. Even on the weekends. Even on the bad days. Because your brain runs on rhythm. It does not respond well to chaos. It responds to pattern. And when you give it a pattern, when you start building a predictable sleep routine, your brain begins to recognize the signals. It starts to know that when certain things happen, it is time to wind down. It is time to stop firing. It is time to rest. She also talks about the environment. Your bedroom should be a place your brain associates with sleep. Not work. Not scrolling. Not anxiety spirals. Sleep. This matters more than most people realize, because your brain is extremely good at learning associations. If you spend hours in bed, doing everything except sleeping, your brain learns that bed means being awake. And then when you actually want to sleep, your brain does not get the memo. Jenny talks about making the bedroom as dark and quiet as possible. about having a temperature that actually supports sleep, about the difference that even small changes to your environment can make. The thing nobody wants to hear. Here is the part of this section that Jenny delivers with her signature honesty. She says, if your sleep is terrible, your anxiety and depression will be harder to manage. Full stop. You can do everything else right. You can go to therapy. You can take your medication. You can practice every coping skill you have ever learned. But if your brain is not getting the sleep it needs, it is running on empty. And an empty brain cannot do the work of managing mental health. It just cannot. Sleep is not the cure for depression or anxiety. Jenny does not say that, but she does say it is one of the most important tools in the entire toolkit, and it is the one that most people skip first when life gets hard, when they are stressed, when they feel like there are not enough hours, and that is exactly backwards, because the more overwhelmed you are, the more your brain needs sleep. Not less. More. Your brain needs washing too. Jenny uses a simple comparison in this section that sticks with you. She says we all understand that our bodies need cleaning. We wash our hair. We brush our teeth. We would not go 3 weeks without washing our clothes. But we treat our brain like it can just keep going. Indefinitely. Without rest. Without reset. Without the cleaning that only sleep can provide. And then we wonder why everything feels like too much. Why small things feel so heavy. Why we cannot think clearly. Why we keep snapping at the people we love. Why the simplest decisions feel impossible. The answer might not be complicated. It might just be sleep. Your brain needs to be washed, just like everything else, and sleep is the only thing that washes it. This was part 2 of How to Be Okay When Nothing Is Okay by Jenny Lawson. In part 3, we are going to talk about something that most people feel deeply ashamed of: asking for help, doing things the easy way, and why Jenny says working on easy mode is still working. Part 3 is coming next, and if you have ever felt guilty for struggling, this next part was written specifically for that feeling. Chapter 3. Working on easy mode is still working. There is a game that most people play. Not a fun game. Not a game anyone asked to join. It is called doing everything the hard way, and then feeling guilty when it still is not enough. You know this game. You set an alarm for 6 in the morning. Because that is what productive people do. You write a to-do list with 15 things on it. Because that is what organized people do. You try to push through the hard days without asking anyone for help. Because that is what strong people do. And then when you cannot do it, when the alarm goes off and your body refuses, when the list does not get finished, when you desperately need help, but cannot bring yourself to ask, you do not think something is wrong with the system. You think something is wrong with you. Jenny Lawson has played this game for most of her life, and in this part of the book she says something that a lot of people desperately need to hear. Working on easy mode is still working. What easy mode actually means. Before we go further, let us be very clear about what Jenny means by easy mode. She does not mean doing nothing. She does not mean giving up. She does not mean making excuses. Easy mode means using every tool, every accommodation, every shortcut, every support available to you, so that you can keep going, so that you can keep creating, so that you can show up on the days when showing up feels impossible. It is not laziness. It is strategy. It is knowing your brain and working with it instead of constantly battling against it. Jenny says this shift in thinking changed everything for her. Not the external circumstances, the thinking. The moment she stopped treating accommodations as failure and started treating them as tools, everything got a little more manageable. The comparison trap. Here is one of the most damaging things that happens to people who struggle with mental health. They compare their insides to other people's outsides. They look at someone else, someone who seems to manage everything effortlessly. The full inbox answered, the workout done, the meals prepared, the career advancing, the social life thriving, and they think, why can they do all of that, and I cannot even do this one thing? What is wrong with me? But Jenny is very direct about this kind of comparison. She says, you are not comparing equally. You do not know what that person's brain is doing on the inside. You do not know what they are sacrificing, what they are hiding, what they are struggling with that nobody can see. And more importantly, even if they genuinely find things easier than you do, that is their brain, not yours. You do not have their brain. You have yours. And your brain has its own wiring, its own quirks, its own challenges, and it deserves its own customized approach, not someone else's. Asking for help is not weakness. This is the part of this section that Jenny writes about with particular honesty. Asking for help is genuinely hard for a lot of people, especially for people who have spent years telling themselves they should be able to handle things, especially for people whose mental health challenges are invisible to the outside world. Because you look fine, you function, you show up, and somewhere along the way, you started believing that looking fine meant you had no right to ask for more. Jenny has felt this. She knows what it is like to need an accommodation and to feel deeply ashamed of needing it, to wish you were the kind of person who did not need it. But she also knows what it feels like to finally ask, to finally say, this is what I need. This is what helps me function. This is how my brain works. And to have that accommodation make the difference between being able to create and not being able to. She says, asking for accommodations is not admitting defeat. It is refusing to fail. It is saying, I want to be here. I want to do this work. I want to show up. So I am going to ask for what I need. To make that possible, normal is not a real thing. One of the most freeing ideas in this entire section is something Jenny says about the word normal. She says there is no single normal way for a brain to work. There are billions of people on this planet, and every single one of them has a slightly different brain, a slightly different wiring, slightly different strength, slightly different struggles. The idea that there is one correct way to function, one right amount of productivity, one right way to focus, one right way to get through the day, is completely made up. It was invented by a world designed for a very specific kind of brain. A brain that is neurotypical. A brain that does not live with depression or anxiety. A brain that does not have ADHD. And if your brain does not fit that very specific mold, you have been spending your whole life trying to run a race that was not designed for you, on a track that was not built for your body, and then feeling like a failure for not keeping up. Jenny says, stop measuring yourself against a standard that was never meant for you. Measure yourself against what is possible for you, on your brain, on your particular, completely unique, sometimes infuriating, but also genuinely remarkable brain. What works for you is valid. Here is the practical heart of this section. Jenny does not give you a list of things you must do. She gives you permission. Permission to use noise-canceling headphones if that helps you focus. Permission to work in short bursts instead of long stretches. Permission to take breaks that other people might think are too long. Permission to use reminders and alarms and lists and whatever external tools your brain needs to stay on track. Permission to work from bed on the days when bed is the only place you can work. Permission to do less on the hard days, without calling it failure. Permission to ask a friend to sit with you while you work. Not to help, just to be there. Because sometimes just having another human presence is enough to help a brain find its focus. All of these things are legitimate. All of them count. All of them are real work, even if they do not look like what other people's work looks like. Jenny says, use what works, not what is supposed to work, not what worked for someone else. What actually works for the brain you actually have. Easy mode is not giving up. Let us come back to where this section started. Working on easy mode is still working. Easy mode does not mean you stop trying. It means you stop trying to do things in ways that your brain was never designed to do. It means you stop punishing yourself for needing what you need. It means you accept help. You use tools. You ask for accommodations. You do what works. And you show up, imperfectly, inconsistently, on easy mode. But you show up, and showing up on easy mode counts. It counts the same as showing up any other way. Jenny Lawson has written best-selling books on easy mode. Not because she pushed through without support, but because she used every tool, every accommodation, every form of help available to her. And she created something real, something that has helped millions of people. On easy mode. And so can you. This was part 3 of How to Be Okay When Nothing Is Okay by Jenny Lawson. Part 4 is next. And it is about something that sounds simple, but most people with anxiety and depression almost never do. Celebrate. Jenny explains why celebrating the small things might be one of the most powerful mental health tools you are not using. Part 4 is coming, and it might just change how you end every single day. Chapter 4. Celebrate good times, come on. Quick question. What did you accomplish today? Not what did you fail to do. Not what is still on the list. Not what you should have done but did not. What did you actually do? Maybe you got out of bed. Maybe you replied to one email. Maybe you drank enough water. Maybe you got through a meeting without your anxiety eating you alive. Maybe you just survived the day. Now here is the real question. Did you celebrate any of that? Did you stop, even for 1 second, and say to yourself, hey, I did that. That counts. Good job. If the answer is no, you are not alone. Most people never do this. And according to Jenny Lawson, that might be one of the biggest mistakes you are making for your brain. Why celebrating small things matters. Jenny is very clear in this section. Celebration is not a reward for doing something impressive. It is not a trophy you hand yourself after achieving something worthy. Celebration is a tool. A real, science-backed, brain-changing tool. Here is why. Your brain pays more attention to negative things than positive ones. This is not a personality flaw. It is biology. It is called negativity bias. Your brain was designed to notice threat, to remember dangers, to stay alert to everything that could go wrong. Because for thousands of years that is what kept humans alive. But the problem is, in modern life, that same brain that was built to spot threats is now running inside a body that is sitting at a desk, or lying in bed, or trying to write one email, and it is still looking for dangers everywhere, still cataloging everything wrong, still skipping right past everything that went right. Jenny says when you celebrate small things deliberately, you are not being silly. You are not being fake positive. You are actively training your brain to notice what it was designed to skip. You are making it work against its own default setting. And over time, that practice changes things. What celebration actually looks like. Here is where Jenny Lawson is at her most herself. Because when she talks about celebrating small things, she does not mean buying yourself a cake. She does not mean throwing a party. She means ridiculous things. Genuinely ridiculous. Things that would make most self-help books uncomfortable. She talks about celebrating finishing a paragraph by doing a tiny victory dance in her desk chair. She talks about giving herself a metaphorical gold star for answering one phone call. She talks about acknowledging out loud to herself that showering was hard today, and she did it anyway, and that is worth noting. Jenny says the size of the accomplishment does not determine whether it deserves celebrating. The size of the difficulty does. If something was hard for you, even if it would not be hard for someone else, it counts. You get to celebrate it, and the fact that it would not be hard for someone else is completely irrelevant, because you are not someone else. You are you, with your brain, and your brain did something hard. That is worth noticing. Jenny's own celebration stories, one of the most entertaining and genuinely touching parts of this section, is when Jenny shares the specific things she has celebrated, things that to a neurotypical brain might seem like nothing, but to her were genuine victories. She talks about celebrating the fact that she made a doctor's appointment, not attended it, made it, just the phone call, because for someone with severe anxiety that phone call is a small war. She talks about celebrating getting dressed on a day when depression made every task feel like moving through concrete. She talks about celebrating finishing a chapter by watching an entire episode of a show she loves, without guilt, fully, as the reward it was, and she talks about keeping a list, a real, physical list, of small things she has done that deserve acknowledgement, not because anyone else would put them on a list, but because her brain needs to see them written down, needs to see the evidence that days are not just full of things she failed to do, but also full of things she quietly, stubbornly did. The problem with waiting for big moments. Here is something Jenny addresses directly in this section. Most people live in a state of waiting. Waiting for the big achievement. Waiting for the promotion. Waiting for the finished book. Waiting for the number on the scale. Waiting for the relationship. Waiting for the goal to finally arrive. And then they will celebrate. Then they will feel good. Then they will let themselves rest. But Jenny says that is a trap. A very convincing trap, but a trap. Because the big moments are rare. They are separated by long stretches of ordinary days. And if you only allow yourself to feel good on the big days, you are spending most of your life in a state of not yet. Not yet worthy of celebration. Not yet deserving of rest. Not yet allowed to feel proud. That is not motivation. That is punishment. And you are doing it to yourself. Jenny says the alternative is simple. Find something in today that deserves a moment of recognition. Not tomorrow. Not after. Today. Right now. It does not have to be big. It just has to be real. Something you did. Something you survived. Something you attempted, even if it did not go perfectly. And give it one moment of genuine acknowledgement. That is it. That is the whole practice. Training your brain to look for wins. Here is the science behind why this actually works. When you celebrate something, even something small, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine, the feel-good chemical, and dopamine does something important. It reinforces the behavior that produced it. Tells your brain, that was worth doing. Do that again. So when you celebrate finishing a task, your brain begins to associate finishing tasks with feeling good, and over time it becomes slightly easier to start the next task, because somewhere in your wiring the memory of that good feeling is waiting. Jenny also points out that celebration trains your attention. The more you practice noticing small wins, the better your brain gets at spotting them. And the better it gets at spotting them, the more you see. It is the same principle as the red car example. Once you start looking for something, you find it everywhere. The wins were always there. You just were not looking. Start tonight. Jenny gives one very simple instruction at the end of this section. Tonight, before you go to sleep, name one thing. Just one. Something from today that you did. That you finished, that you attempted, that you got through, and say it out loud, or write it down, or just hold it in your mind for one quiet moment, and let yourself feel even a tiny bit of satisfaction, not because it was perfect, not because it was impressive, but because it was yours. You did it, and that is enough. That is more than enough. In Part 5, we go even deeper, into something darker. The voice inside your head that tells you you are not good enough, that you are doing it wrong, that you are too much or not enough. Jenny calls it what it actually is, your brain lying to you, and she shows you exactly how to catch it. Part 5 is where things get really honest. Chapter 5. Your brain is a liar. Your brain has a message for you right now. It has been sending it, probably for years. You are not good enough. You are doing it wrong. Everyone else has it together, except you. You are too much. You are not enough. You are going to fail. They do not actually like you. You are falling behind. You should be further along by now. Sound familiar? Now here is the thing Jenny Lawson wants you to know. None of that is true. Not one word of it. Your brain is lying to you. And it has been, for a very long time. The brain was not built for kindness. Let us start with something important. Your brain did not evolve to make you feel good about yourself. It evolved to keep you alive. Those are very different jobs. Keeping you alive means spotting every threat, every risk, every potential failure, every way things could go wrong. Your brain is extraordinarily good at this job. It notices criticism 10 times faster than it notices praise. It remembers the one thing that went wrong, long after it has forgotten the 50 things that went right. It replays embarrassing moments at 3 in the morning. It invents catastrophic scenarios for things that have not happened yet. And it presents all of this with complete confidence, as if it is simply reporting the fact. Jenny says, your brain is not reporting fact. It is running a very old program. A program that was designed for a completely different world. A world where the threats were real, where the danger was physical, and where constant vigilance was the difference between surviving and not. But you are not in that world, and yet your brain is still running that program, still sounding the alarm, still sending the messages, still convincing you that the worst version of every situation is the most likely one. What intrusive thoughts actually are. This is one of the most important things Jenny addresses in this section. Intrusive thoughts. Most people who experience them have never heard them named. They just know the feeling. A thought arrives completely unbidden. Something dark. Something alarming. Something that makes you think, what is wrong with me for even thinking that? Maybe it is a fear about something terrible happening. Maybe it is a sudden thought of doing or saying something completely out of character. Maybe it is a voice that whispers you are not wanted, not needed, not worthy, and because the thought arrived in your own head, you assume it must mean something. You assume it must be a reflection of who you are. Jenny says, it is not. Intrusive thoughts are not confessions. They are not revelations about your true character. They are not secret wishes. They are just thoughts, random, uninvited, often completely disconnected from who you actually are. The brain produces thousands of thoughts every single day. Most of them are completely meaningless noise. The problem is not that the thought arrived. The problem is what you do with it after. If you grab it, hold it, examine it, worry about it, build a case around it, that thought gets bigger. It gets stickier. It starts to feel like truth. But if you see it, acknowledge it, and let it pass, it loses its power. Jenny says the goal is not to never have dark thoughts. The goal is to stop treating every thought like a verdict. Self-doubt and the liar in your head. Self-doubt is a specific kind of lie that the brain tells, and it is one of the most convincing, because self-doubt does not sound like an alarm. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like caution. It sounds like someone looking out for you. When self-doubt says, "Do not try that. You will just fail," it sounds like it is protecting you from embarrassment. When it says, "Do not share that. Nobody will care," it sounds like it is saving you from rejection. When it says, "You are not really qualified. Someone else should do this," it sounds like it is keeping you honest. But Jenny is very clear. Self-doubt is not wisdom. Self-doubt is fear dressed up as reason. And the fact that it sounds logical makes it more dangerous, not less. Because you are more likely to believe something that sounds reasonable. You are more likely to follow something that sounds like it is on your side. Jenny has lived with self-doubt her entire career. Every book she has written, she has been convinced, at some point, that it was terrible, that nobody would want to read it, that she had somehow fooled everyone so far. But this time they would finally see that she was not good enough. This is called imposter syndrome, and it is one of the loudest lies the brain tells. Jenny knows this voice well, and she has learned not to argue with it, but to stop obeying it. How to catch the lie. Jenny offers something practical in this section, something you can actually use. The next time your brain sends one of its lying messages, she calls it questioning the thought. Not fighting it, not suppressing it, not screaming at it to go away. Questioning it. When the thought arrives, you ask it a simple question. Is that actually true? Not is it possible? Not can I imagine it being true? Is it actually, provably, right now, true? If the answer is no, you do not have to keep carrying it. Jenny gives examples of how she does this herself. When her brain says, "Nobody cares what you think," she asks, "Is that actually true?" And the honest answer is, no. Some people do care. The evidence says so. When her brain says, "You are failing at everything," she asks, "Is that actually true?" And the honest answer is, no. Some things are hard right now. But failing at everything is not the same as finding some things difficult. The thought was lying. It was exaggerating. It was taking one real feeling, and stretching it into a statement that is simply not true. Questioning the thought does not make it disappear, but it gives you distance from it. It reminds you that you are not the thought. You are the person observing the thought, and that distance changes everything. You are not your thoughts. This is the heart of everything Jenny says in this section. You are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are things that happen in your brain, but they are not you. They do not define you. They do not determine your worth. They are not a window into your true self. They are electrical signals, patterns, old programs running, fear wearing different costumes, and you do not have to believe everything that runs through your own head. You are allowed to look at a thought, even a scary one, even an unkind one, even one that has been showing up for years, and say, I see you. I know you are not real, and I am not going with you today. Jenny has not mastered this perfectly. She is not claiming she has. Some days the lies are louder than others. Some days the doubt wins a few rounds. But she keeps questioning. She keeps noticing. She keeps reminding herself that the voice in her head is not an authority. It is not a judge. It is not the truth. It is just a very loud, very persistent, very convincing liar. And knowing that is enough to change how much power you give it. Part 6 is next, and it takes everything this section started one step further, because it is not enough to stop being cruel to yourself. Jenny says you have to go further than that. You have to actually be kind to yourself, and for a lot of people, that is the hardest part of all. Chapter 6. Be kind, especially to yourself. Imagine someone you love deeply, a close friend, a sibling, someone who means the world to you. Now imagine they come to you one day, exhausted, struggling, barely holding it together. They sit down next to you and they say, I am not doing well. I am falling behind. I feel like I am failing at everything. What do you say to them? Do you look them in the eye and say, You are right. You should be doing better. Other people handle this fine. What is wrong with you? Of course not. You would never say that. You would be gentle. You would be patient. You would remind them of everything they are handling, of how hard things have been, of how much they are doing despite all of it. You would be kind. Now here is Jenny Lawson's question. Why will you do that for someone else, but not for yourself? The standard you hold yourself to. Most people who struggle with depression, anxiety, or self-doubt hold themselves to a completely different standard than they hold anyone else. They are patient with others. They are understanding with others. They make allowances for other people's bad days, for other people's mistakes, for other people's limitations. But for themselves, they are ruthless, demanding, unforgiving. They would never speak to a struggling friend the way they speak to themselves. And yet the voice inside runs constantly, all day, on repeat, saying things that they would never allow another person to say to someone they love. Jenny calls this out directly in this section, and she says it is not strength, it is not discipline, it is not high standards, it is cruelty. And it is making everything worse, not better, worse. Jenny's own history of being too hard on herself. Jenny does not write this section from a comfortable distance. She writes it from inside the experience, because she has spent a significant portion of her life being her own harshest critic. She talks about the kind of internal commentary that runs on her worst days. The voice that says she is not productive enough, that she has wasted the day, that other writers are doing more, that she should be further along, that she is letting people down. She talks about how depression amplifies this voice, how on the bad days that voice is not a whisper, it is a shout. It drowns out every other thought. Every achievement disappears. Every good thing she has done becomes invisible, and all that remains is a relentless list of everything she is not, everything she has not done, everything she is failing at. Jenny says she has had to consciously, deliberately teach herself a different approach. Not because it came naturally, because it did not, but because the alternative, the constant harshness, was not making her better, it was just making her smaller. Self-compassion is not an excuse. Before we go further, it is important to address what Jenny anticipates some people will think. That being kind to yourself is just making excuses, that it means lowering your standards, that it is the opposite of taking responsibility. Jenny disagrees. Completely. She says self-compassion is not about pretending things are fine when they are not. It is not about avoiding accountability. It is not about giving yourself permission to stop trying. It is about giving yourself the same grace you would give someone else, who is doing their best in genuinely difficult circumstances. Self-compassion says, "This is hard. I am struggling. That is real. And I am still here, still trying, still showing up. And that deserves acknowledgement, not punishment." Research actually backs this up. People who practice self-compassion do not become lazy or complacent. They become more resilient, more willing to try again after failure, more able to recover from setbacks, because they are not spending all their energy fighting themselves. They have energy left to actually do the work. Removing yourself from bad situations. This is where this section becomes particularly important, and particularly honest. Jenny talks about removing yourself from situations that are harmful, from environments that make you worse, from people who drain you, from commitments that your mental health genuinely cannot support. And she is very clear. This is not giving up. This is not weakness. This is not cowardice. This is self-care. Real self-care. Not the kind advertised with bubble baths and candles. The kind that sometimes requires a difficult conversation, or a hard decision, or saying no to something you previously said yes to, or stepping back from something that looks fine on the outside, but is quietly making you sicker on the inside. Jenny says she has had to do this, has had to step back from things that looked important, that felt like they should be fine, that other people handle without a problem, but that were, for her brain, too much. And every time she has done it, she has felt guilty at first, selfish at first, like she was letting someone down, but she has also felt something else. Relief. The kind of relief that comes from finally listening to your own limits, instead of pretending they do not exist. What talking to yourself kindly actually looks like. Jenny makes this practical. She does not just say be kinder to yourself. She shows you how. She suggests when the harsh voice starts. You notice it. You name it. You say to yourself, there is that voice again. The one that is not on my side. And then you try. Not perfectly. Not always successfully. But try. To replace it with something a friend would say. Not fake positivity. Not empty reassurance. Something honest. Something that acknowledges the difficulty, while also acknowledging that you are still here. Still trying. Still worth kindness. She also talks about the physical side of this. How you hold yourself. How you speak to yourself out loud. How you treat your own body. On the days when everything feels hard. Eating something. Even something small. Resting. Without guilt. Moving gently. If movement is possible. These things sound simple. But for someone whose brain is running a constant program of self-criticism, they are acts of resistance, small rebellions against a voice that says you do not deserve to be treated well. You deserve the same kindness. Jenny closes this section with something very direct. She says, "You are not exempt from deserving kindness, not because of how your brain works, not because of what you have not accomplished, not because of your worst days, not because of your hardest chapters. You deserve the same patience, the same gentleness, the same basic human compassion that you would offer without hesitation to someone you love. The fact that it is coming from inside does not make it less deserved. It makes it more urgent, because the voice inside is the one you hear most, the one that is always there. And if that voice is always working against you, nothing else will be quite enough. Kindness to yourself is not the nice thing to do. It is the necessary thing." Part 7 is where Jenny goes somewhere most people are trained to avoid. Vulnerability. Sharing the hard things. Saying out loud what you have been keeping hidden. And why that, as uncomfortable as it is, might be the most healing thing you ever do. Share. Chapter 7. Share the hard times. There is something you have never told anyone. Something that happened. Something you felt. Something that was so hard, so embarrassing, so dark, that you decided a long time ago, nobody could ever know. Maybe it is a mental health struggle you have been hiding for years. Maybe it is a failure you are still ashamed of. Maybe it is a thought you had once that scared you so much you buried it immediately. Maybe it is just the honest answer to how you actually are. On the days when you say you are fine, whatever it is, you have kept it hidden, because somewhere along the way you learned that some things are not safe to share. That vulnerability gets you hurt. That honesty makes people uncomfortable. That the parts of you that are messy and hard and real are better kept out of sight. Jenny Lawson wants to gently but firmly challenge that. What hiding actually costs you. Jenny is honest about what keeping things hidden actually does to a person. It does not protect you. It isolates you. There is a difference. Hiding something feels like protection. It feels like you are keeping yourself safe, keeping yourself from judgment, from rejection, from the discomfort of being truly seen. But what it actually does is put a wall between you and everyone else, a wall that keeps the judgment out, but also keeps the connection out. And without connection, without someone else knowing what you are actually going through, the hard thing gets heavier, not lighter, because you are carrying it alone. You are managing it alone. You are surviving it alone. And alone is a very heavy place to be. Jenny has experienced this. She knows what it is like to smile through something terrible, to perform normalcy when everything inside is anything but normal, to look fine when you are not fine. And she knows that it feels safer in the short term, but it costs you in ways you do not always notice, until the weight becomes genuinely unbearable. The moment Jenny started sharing, one of the most important parts of this section is when Jenny talks about what happened when she started being honest, publicly, on her blog, about her depression, about her anxiety, about her bad days, about the times when she could not leave her house, when she could not answer emails, when she could not function the way the world expected her to. She did not know what would happen. She was terrified. She expected judgment. She expected people to think less of her, to lose respect for her, to leave. Instead, something completely different happened. People wrote back, in enormous numbers, saying, "Me too. I thought I was the only one. I have never told anyone this before. I did not know anyone else felt this way. Thank you for saying it out loud." Every time Jenny shared something hard, something she had been afraid to say, someone else exhaled. Someone else felt a little less alone. Someone else realized that the thing they had been hiding was not as shameful or as unusual or as unacceptable as they had believed. And that realization, that moment of recognition, that sudden feeling of, I am not the only one, is one of the most healing things a human being can experience. Vulnerability and connection. Jenny draws on something very real here. The link between vulnerability and genuine connection. She says, most people try to connect by showing their best selves, their most capable selves, their most polished, most impressive, most together selves. And the connections they form are real, but they are also shallow, because they are connections to a version of you that is not fully true. Real connection, the kind that actually helps, the kind that makes you feel genuinely less alone, the kind that sustains you through the hardest chapters, requires the real you, the struggling you, the messy you, the you that does not have it all figured out, because that is the you that other people actually recognize. That is the you that makes someone else put their hand on their chest and say, yes, that, exactly that. I know that feeling. Polished versions of people do not create connection. Honest ones do. And vulnerability is simply the courage to be honest, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it feels risky, even when you are not sure how it will be received. Terrible moments make remarkable stories. Here is one of the most unique things Jenny offers in this section, and it is something that only a writer with her particular perspective could offer. She says, your worst moments will become your best stories. Not in a dismissive way. Not in a this will all make sense someday way. In a very practical, very Jenny Lawson way. The things that were the hardest to live through, the embarrassing moments, the panic attacks in public, the cancelled plans, the things that felt at the time like absolute disasters, have a way of becoming the moments that other people connect with most. Because they are real. Because they are specific. Because they do not pretend. Jenny has written some of her funniest and most read pieces about her worst moments, about times she was completely overwhelmed, about times her anxiety turned something ordinary into something completely chaotic. And people love those pieces, not because they are laughing at her, but because they recognize themselves, because they have had those moments too. And seeing someone else not just survive them, but share them, find humor in them, turn them into something, makes their own hard moments feel slightly more survivable. She says the act of sharing something hard does not just help the person hearing it, it helps the person sharing it, because putting something into words forces you to look at it differently, to find the edges of it, to understand it in a way that, when it was just inside your head, was not possible. Sharing is not just connection. It is processing. It is transformation. It is taking something that had power over you and giving it a different shape. How to start sharing. Jenny does not tell you to post everything online. She does not say to tell everyone everything. She is not encouraging oversharing with strangers. She is encouraging honest connection with people you trust, or with a therapist, or with a journal, or even with a screen if that is what feels safe right now. The form matters less than the act of taking something that has been hidden and bringing it into the light, even a small light, even just your own. She suggests starting small. One honest answer to how are you, to someone you trust. One thing admitted that you have been keeping quiet. One moment of saying, actually, things have been really hard, and seeing what happens, because what Jenny has found again and again is that honesty is almost never as dangerous as you think it will be, and the relief of being known, even a little, even imperfectly, even awkwardly, is almost always worth the fear of saying it. You are not too much. Jenny ends this section with something she has needed to hear herself many times. She says, "You are not too much. Your struggles are not too heavy. Your hard times are not a burden you are imposing on other people. They are your humanity, and sharing them does not make you weak. It makes you findable. It makes you someone that another person who is struggling can find, and recognize, and breathe next to, and feel just a little less alone because of. You do not have to share everything, but you do not have to hide everything either. The middle ground, where honesty lives, is also where healing lives." Part 8 is next. Jenny gets very practical. She talks about something that many people with ADHD, anxiety, and depression know intimately: the brain that simply will not focus, no matter how much you need it to, and what to do when willpower is not enough. Chapter 8. Focus when your brain will not. You sit down to work. You have everything you need. The time is there. The task is clear. You know exactly what needs to be done. And your brain looks at all of that and says absolutely not. It goes somewhere else entirely. To a conversation from 3 years ago. To a snack it wants. To a completely unrelated idea that has nothing to do with what you are supposed to be doing. To a noise outside. To the way the light looks at a certain angle. To anything, everything, except the thing in front of you. And you sit there knowing you need to focus, trying to force yourself to focus, getting increasingly frustrated with yourself for not focusing, which makes focusing even harder. And then the guilt arrives, and the shame, and the voice that says, "Why can you not just do this? Other people can just do this. Why is this so hard for you?" Jenny Lawson knows this experience from the inside, and this section of the book is entirely dedicated to what actually helps when willpower alone is simply not enough. Why ADHD brains work the way they do. Jenny does not spend time making you feel bad about how your brain works. She spends time explaining it, because understanding your brain is the first step to working with it. An ADHD brain does not have a focus problem. It has a regulation problem. It struggles to direct attention where you choose, instead of where it naturally goes. And where it naturally goes is toward whatever is most interesting, most stimulating, most novel, most urgent. The ADHD brain is not lazy. It is actually extraordinarily capable of intense focus. When the right conditions are present, when something is genuinely compelling, when there is a deadline close enough to feel real, when the work connects to something that genuinely matters. But when the conditions are not right, when the task is important but not interesting, when the deadline is far away, when the work is routine and familiar and unstimulating, the brain simply will not cooperate, no matter how many times you tell it to. Jenny says understanding this changed how she approaches work completely. She stopped treating focus as a matter of discipline, and started treating it as a matter of environment, as a matter of finding the right conditions, instead of forcing the wrong ones. Pink noise and what it actually does. One of the most practical things Jenny shares in this section is the role of sound in helping an easily distracted brain stay on task. Specifically, pink noise. Pink noise is a type of background sound. It is similar to white noise, that steady hiss you might have heard from a fan or air conditioner, but slightly softer, more balanced across frequencies. Some people describe it as rain, or wind, or the sound of a gentle waterfall. And for a brain that gets pulled away by every sound in the environment, pink noise works as a kind of acoustic blanket. It masks the random noises that trigger distraction, the distant conversation, the car outside, the person moving around in the next room, instead of silence, which can feel unbearably loud to an ADHD brain. Pink noise gives it something steady and predictable to rest against. Jenny uses this herself. On the days when quiet is too quiet, and too full of the sound of her own spiraling thoughts. She also mentions other types of sound that help different brains. Instrumental music, brown noise, the ambient sound of a coffee shop. The key is finding what your brain responds to, not what is supposed to work according to someone else. Body doubling, the strange trick that works. Here is something Jenny talks about that sounds strange until you try it, and then it makes complete sense. It is called body doubling. Body doubling means working in the physical presence of another person, not working together on the same task, not asking them for help, just having another human being present in the same space. While you work on your own thing, maybe they are working too, maybe they are reading, maybe they are just sitting there. The specific activity of the other person does not matter. What matters is that they are there. And for many people with ADHD, that presence changes everything. Suddenly, the task feels possible. The brain settles. The drifting happens less. The work actually gets done. Jenny says nobody fully understands why this works. But the leading theory is that the social presence of another person engages a different part of the brain, a part that responds to being witnessed, to being seen in the act of doing something, and that engagement provides just enough additional regulation to keep the ADHD brain on track. Jenny has used this with friends, with her husband, on video calls where she and someone else work silently together on completely different things. She says it feels odd to explain, but it genuinely works. And feeling odd about a tool does not make the tool less valid. Creative blocks and what they actually are. Jenny also addresses creative blocks in this section, and she offers a perspective on them that is both honest and genuinely useful. She says a creative block is almost never a sign that the creativity is gone. It is almost always a sign that something else is getting in the way. Fear, mostly. Fear that what you make will not be good enough. Fear that you have run out of ideas. Fear that the last thing you made was a fluke. Fear that this time the blank page will stay blank. And because the brain cannot distinguish between a creative block and a genuine threat, it treats both with the same response. Avoidance, distraction, busy work. Anything to not have to sit with the discomfort of not knowing whether you can do it. Jenny's solution is very practical. She says, lower the stakes. Do not sit down to write the perfect thing. Sit down to write anything. Something bad. Something that will never see the light of day. Something that does not count as the real work. Because the goal is not the output. The goal is to get the brain moving, to get it past the wall of fear, by convincing it that there is nothing at stake. Once the brain is moving, once the words are coming, even bad ones, the real work often follows naturally. She also talks about working in very short bursts. 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, not to finish anything, not to accomplish anything significant, just to start. Because for an ADHD brain, starting is the hardest part. Once you are in it, once there is momentum, staying becomes much easier. The 5-minute commitment gets you past the wall. Use the focus you have, not the focus you wish you had. This is the central idea of everything Jenny shares in this section. She says, stop waiting for perfect focus. Stop waiting for the day when your brain finally cooperates fully, when there are no distractions, when everything feels clear, when focus arrives clean and complete and ready to use. Because that day may not come, and even if it does, it will not last forever. What you have is imperfect focus, patchy focus. 5 minutes here, 15 minutes there. Focus that comes and goes with no predictable schedule. And that is enough. Not ideal, but enough. Jenny has written entire books in short scattered bursts of imperfect focus, in small windows between bad days, with pink noise running and a friend on a video call sitting quietly nearby, not waiting for perfect conditions, using the conditions she had, and the work got done. Not the way a neurotypical brain would do it, but it got done, and it reached millions of people. Your brain does not need to work perfectly to produce something real. It just needs enough of a window, and enough compassion for itself, to use the focus it has. Part 9 is next. Jenny tackles something that most self-help books get completely wrong. Motivation. Why it fails. Why waiting for it is a trap, and what to build instead. That actually works when motivation disappears, which it always does. Part 9 is where the practical tools get even more real. Chapter 9. Motivation is a myth. Build systems instead. Raise your hand if you have ever said this. I will start when I feel motivated. I will do it once I am in the right headspace. I am just waiting for the inspiration to hit. Once I feel ready, I will begin. Most people say some version of these sentences on a regular basis, and most people who say them never start, or start very late, or start only when the deadline is close enough to cause genuine panic. And then they wonder why motivation is so unreliable, why it shows up sometimes and disappears completely on the days they need it most. Jenny Lawson has a very direct answer to this question. Motivation is not a strategy. It is a feeling, and feelings are not reliable. They come and go. They respond to sleep and weather and hormones and 100 other things you cannot control. And if your entire system for getting things done depends on a feeling, you are going to spend a significant portion of your life waiting. Why motivation fails people with depression. Here is something Jenny addresses very directly. For people living with depression, motivation is not just unreliable. It is often clinically absent. Depression does not just make you sad. It removes the feeling of wanting to do things. The technical term for this is anhedonia. It means the inability to feel pleasure or interest in things you normally enjoy. So when someone with depression is told, just find your motivation, just push through, just remember your why, what they hear is, just feel something you are biochemically unable to feel right now, which is completely unhelpful, and is also why so many people with depression blame themselves for not being motivated, when the real problem is not a character flaw. It is brain chemistry. Jenny knows this. She does not wait for motivation. She has learned not to trust it, because on her worst days, it is not available, and she still needs to live her life, still needs to show up, still needs to create. So she built something that does not require motivation to work. Systems. What a system actually is. A system is a structure you create in advance that makes it easier to do the thing without needing to feel like it. It removes the decision from the moment, because decisions require energy, and when you are depressed or anxious or overwhelmed, energy is the first thing to disappear. A system says, at this time, in this place, this is what happens next. No decision required. No waiting to feel ready. No negotiating with yourself. Just the next step. Already decided. Already arranged. Already waiting for you. Jenny gives examples of what this looks like in real life. She talks about having a specific place she goes to write. Not a perfect place. Not a beautiful, Instagram-worthy workspace. just a consistent place that her brain has learned to associate with writing. So when she sits down there, even on the bad days, her brain gets the signal. This is what we do here. She talks about having a specific time that is for a specific thing. Not because that time is always perfect, but because consistency creates a groove. And grooves are easier to follow than blank open spaces. Jenny's personal productivity hacks. One of the most valuable things about this section is that Jenny shares real specific tools, not abstract advice, real things she actually uses. On real difficult days, she talks about the power of extremely small tasks. Not the whole project, not the whole chapter, not the whole to-do list. One thing. The smallest possible version of one thing. Not write the chapter. Open the document. Not clean the house. Pick up 3 things from the floor. Not exercise. Put on your shoes. She says the goal of a small task is not to accomplish something significant. The goal is to create momentum. Because a body in motion tends to stay in motion. And a brain that has started, even with something tiny, is already past the hardest part, which is starting. She also talks about using external accountability, telling someone else what you are going to do, not because you need their permission, but because the brain responds differently to a commitment made to another person than to a commitment made only to yourself. A commitment to yourself can be quietly abandoned without consequence. A commitment to someone else has a social weight, a friction to breaking it. That friction is sometimes enough to keep you going. When the motivation has disappeared. Small wins and momentum. Jenny talks about the science of small wins in this section, and it connects directly to what she said about celebration in Part 4. Every small task you complete produces a tiny dopamine hit. That dopamine reinforces the behavior, makes it slightly more likely you will do the next thing, and the next, and gradually, without any single dramatic moment, momentum builds, not because you suddenly felt motivated, but because you kept moving, even slowly, even imperfectly, even when nothing felt good. She uses the analogy of a flywheel. A flywheel is a heavy wheel that stores energy as it spins. It is very hard to start. The first push requires enormous effort. The second push is slightly easier. The third easier still. And eventually the wheel is spinning and maintaining its own momentum. That is what small consistent action does to a brain. The first day is hard. The second is slightly less hard. The 10th is easier. Not because the task changed. Because the groove deepened. Because the system started doing some of the work. What to do on the 0 days. Jenny addresses something in this section that most productivity advice completely ignores. The 0 days. The days when nothing gets done. When the system fails. When you could not start. Could not take the small step. Could not pick up the 3 things off the floor. Days when just staying alive was genuinely the entire accomplishment. She says, those days happen. They will keep happening. They are part of the reality of living with a brain that does not always cooperate. And she says, on those days the goal is not productivity. The goal is not momentum. The goal is not systems. The goal is to get to tomorrow. That is it. Just tomorrow. Because tomorrow the system is still there. The small task is still available. The groove is still waiting. Nothing has been erased. Nothing has to start over. You just pick it back up, wherever you left it, without shame, without the story that you ruined everything, without the belief that you have proven once and for all that you cannot do this. 0 days are part of the system too. They are not failures. They are rest. Involuntary rest. sometimes painful rest, but rest that the system can absorb and continue from. You do not need to feel ready. Here is what Jenny wants you to take from this entire section. You are never going to feel perfectly ready. Motivation is not coming to rescue you from starting. It is not waiting just around the corner, ready to arrive in a big inspiring wave, carrying you effortlessly into doing the thing. That is not how it works, not for most people, and especially not for people whose brains make everything harder. What works is smaller, less dramatic, less inspiring, one small thing, at a specific time, in a specific place, whether you feel like it or not. That is the system. And the system does not care how you feel today. It just asks for the next step. One step. Not the whole journey. Not the finished thing. Not the version you are proud of. Just the next step. And then the one after that. And eventually, you will look back and realize you made something. Not because you were motivated, but because you kept showing up. On easy mode. In short bursts. With a friend on a video call. With pink noise running. With the smallest possible task on the list. But showing up. And showing up is enough. Part 10 is next. And it is about something Jenny says has saved her more than almost anything else. Finding your people. The ones who actually get it. The ones who do not need you to explain. How to find them. And why it matters more than you might think. Chapter 10. Find your people. There is a particular kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. You can feel it in a room full of people, at a party, at a family dinner, at work, surrounded by colleagues. It is the feeling of being present, but not seen, of talking, but not really being heard, of smiling and nodding and saying the right things, while feeling, somewhere underneath all of it, that nobody in this room actually knows you, not the real you, not the one who struggles in the ways you struggle, who thinks in the ways you think, who finds hard the things you find hard. That feeling has a name. It is not shyness. It is not antisocial behavior. It is not something wrong with you. It is the absence of your people. And finding them, Jenny Lawson says, is one of the most important things you will ever do for your mental health. Not everyone is your people. Before we talk about how to find your people, it helps to understand what Jenny means by that phrase. Your people are not simply the people you are around most, not your coworkers, not necessarily your family, not the neighbors you have known for years. Your people are the ones who get it, who get you, without explanation, without you having to perform a more acceptable version of yourself, without you having to translate your experience into something more palatable. Your people are the ones around whom you exhale, where the performance stops, where the mask can come off, even just a little. Jenny says for a long time, she did not think these people existed for her. She was the strange one, the one who talked too much about things other people found uncomfortable, who found humor in dark places, who was open about her mental illness in a world that preferred everyone pretend they were fine. She felt like she was the only one, until she discovered she very much was not. Jenny's blog and the discovery of community. When Jenny started writing, openly and honestly, about her depression, about her anxiety, about her bad days and strange thoughts and the ways her brain made ordinary life harder than it looked, she expected silence, or judgment. What she got instead was an enormous community. People who had been quietly carrying the same things, who had never heard anyone say out loud what they were feeling, who had spent years wondering if they were the only one, and they were not. None of them were. Jenny describes this discovery as one of the most significant of her life. Not just professionally, personally, because she had found her people, not by searching for them, but by being herself, loudly and honestly, and letting them find her. She says this is often how it works. When you stop hiding the parts of yourself you are most afraid to show, the people who share those parts start to appear, because they were always there, waiting, hiding too. And when one person stops hiding, it gives others permission to do the same. The Nowhere Bookshop. Jenny opens a bookshop called the Nowhere Bookshop in San Antonio, Texas, and she talks about it in this section, not just as a business, but as an act of community building, of belonging creation. She wanted a place where people who felt like they did not quite fit could come, where the shelves were full of books by people who understood outsider experiences, where the events were for the kind of readers who had always felt slightly too weird for the mainstream, where showing up with your full strange self was not just tolerated, it was the point. Jenny says she did not open the bookshop to make a business decision. She opened it because she needed it, because she knew there were others who needed it too. People who did not just want to buy books, but who wanted to be somewhere they felt like they belonged. And what she discovered when she opened it was exactly what she had hoped. Her people showed up, in numbers she had not anticipated, because they had been waiting for somewhere to go, somewhere that felt like it had been made with them in mind. The lesson she draws from this is not that you need to open a bookshop. It is that belonging is not stumbled upon. It is built, intentionally, by people who are willing to say, here is who I am, here is what I care about, here is the kind of space I need. Is anyone else looking for this too? And almost always, someone is. Online community is real community. Jenny is very clear about something that some people still dismiss. Online community is real community, not a consolation prize, not a lesser substitute for in-person connection. For many people, especially people whose mental health makes leaving the house difficult, whose anxiety makes social situations exhausting, whose struggles are specific enough that the people around them in daily life do not share them, online community is the primary place where they find their people. Jenny has found some of her most important connections through the internet. People who understand what it is to live with treatment-resistant depression, who know what a bad mental health day actually looks like from the inside, who do not say, "Have you tried yoga?" or "Just think positive," or "Everyone feels like that sometimes," who say, "I know. I have been there too. Me too." Those two words, "me too," are among the most healing a human being can hear. And the internet is full of places where they are being said. Jenny says finding even one person who truly gets it changes the weight of things. Not the circumstances, not the brain chemistry, not the hard days, but the weight. Because weight is lighter when it is shared. How to actually find your people. Jenny is practical here. She does not just say, "Go find your tribe." She talks about how to actually do it. She talks about going toward the things you genuinely care about, not the things you think you should care about. The real ones, the embarrassing ones, the niche interests, the specific obsessions, the fandoms, the communities built around things that other people might think are silly, but that feel deeply important to you. Because those specific places, those corners of the internet, those local groups, those events built around very specific things, are where your people are. Because you have the same weird specific thing in common, and shared specific things create connection faster than shared general things. She also talks about the importance of being the one Who starts it? If you cannot find a community that fits, start one. Even something small. A group chat. A monthly meetup. An online forum. A shared hashtag. Because you are not the only one who cannot find it. And the person who builds the space often ends up surrounded by the people they were looking for. You are not too weird to belong. Jenny ends this section with something simple and deeply meant. She says, "You are not too weird to belong somewhere. You are not too broken, too specific, too anxious, too depressed, too much, too strange. There are people who will not just tolerate the full version of you, who will actively prefer it, who have been waiting, without knowing it, for exactly you, the strange parts included, especially the strange parts. You just have to be willing to let them see those parts, to show up honestly, to say, 'This is who I am,' and to give the right people a chance to say, 'Oh, thank goodness, me too.'" Two parts remain, and they are, in some ways, the most important ones. Part 11 is about the thing Jenny says has gotten her through more dark days than almost anything else: making something, creating. Even when everything says there is no point. Part 11 is next. Chapter 11. Make something, anything. Think about the last time you made something. Not bought something. Not watched something. Not consumed something. Made something. With your hands. With your words. With your voice. With your ideas. Maybe it was a meal you cooked from scratch. Maybe it was a garden you planted and tended. Maybe it was a drawing that never left your sketchbook. Maybe it was a sentence that said exactly what you had been trying to say for years. Maybe it was a playlist you made for someone you love. Maybe it was just rearranging a room until it felt like it belonged to you. Now remember how that felt. Not the finished product. The act itself. That quiet absorption. That state of being fully present inside something you were making. Where time moved differently. Where the noise in your head went slightly quieter. Where the weight lifted just enough to breathe. Jenny Lawson says that feeling is not an accident. It is not just a pleasant side effect of doing something you enjoy. It is medicine. Why making things matters for your brain? Let us start with the science. Because Jenny does not just make this claim. She backs it up. When you are in a state of creative making, when your hands are busy and your mind is focused on bringing something into existence, your brain shifts into a different mode. The default mode network, the part of your brain responsible for rumination, for the repetitive anxious thoughts, for replaying embarrassing moments, for catastrophizing about the future. That part goes quiet. Not completely, but significantly, because it is not the active network when you are creating. When you are making something, your task-positive network is running instead. The part that focuses, that solves, that builds. And when the task-positive network is running, the rumination network takes a back seat. Which means, for however long you are making something, the spinning, the spiraling, the relentless negative chatter gets interrupted, not cured, not silenced forever, but interrupted. And sometimes an interruption is exactly what you need. Jenny also talks about the dopamine released during and after creative work, the sense of completion that comes from finishing something, even something small, even something nobody else will ever see. That satisfaction is real. It is chemical, and for brains that struggle to find pleasure, that struggle with motivation and reward and the basic sense that anything is worth doing, creativity is one of the most reliable dopamine-producing activities available. It does not have to be art. Here is where Jenny is very important to hear, because a lot of people hear the word creativity and immediately think, I am not creative. I cannot draw. I cannot write. I am not musical. I do not have an artistic bone in my body. And Jenny says, you are thinking about this too narrowly. Creativity is not a specific set of skills. It is an approach. It is the act of taking nothing, or something simple, and turning it into something. Cooking is creativity. You take raw ingredients, and you make something that did not exist before. Gardening is creativity. You take seeds and soil and time, and you make something grow. Knitting is creativity. Rearranging furniture is creativity. Making a photo album is creativity. Baking bread is creativity. Organizing a playlist that perfectly captures a feeling is creativity. Building a playlist, labeling each song with the reason you chose it, is creativity. Writing a single sentence in a notebook about how you are actually feeling today is creativity. Jenny says, the form does not matter. The medium does not matter. The quality does not matter. What matters is the act, the reaching for something, the making of something that was not there before. That is what the brain responds to. Not your technique, not your output, the act. Jenny and the making of her books. Jenny talks honestly in this section about what writing has done for her mental health. Not the fame, not the success, not the readers. The act of writing itself. She says there have been times when writing was the only thing she could reliably do. When she could not leave the house. When she could not maintain most of the ordinary functions of daily life. But she could write, or at least she could try to write. She could open a document and put words in it. Even bad words. Even words that were not going anywhere. Even words she would delete the next day. Because the act of doing it was giving her brain something to do other than hurt. She says creating did not fix her depression. She is very clear about that. Creativity is not a cure. She still needed medication, still needed therapy, still needed all the other tools. But creativity was one of the things that made the space between slightly more livable, that gave her somewhere to put the things she was carrying, that were too heavy to keep holding alone. Making something is not the same as consuming. This is something Jenny is quite direct about. She distinguishes between consuming, watching, scrolling, reading, listening, and making. Both have their place. Both have value. Rest and consuming are not the enemy. But Jenny says there is a specific kind of restoration that only comes from making. From being the one who adds something, rather than the one who takes in. She talks about the difference in how she feels after a day of only consuming, versus a day where she made something, even something small. On the consuming days, even after rest, even after good content, even after enjoyable entertainment, there is often a flatness, a vague sense of having passed time, but not of having done anything with it. But on the making days, even hard ones, even days when what she made was not good, when the writing was rough and the output was minimal, there is something different, a sense of having been present, of having added something to the day, even something small, even something only she will ever know about. It counts. It registers in the brain. It matters. Starts so small it is almost embarrassing. Jenny gives very practical advice in this section. For people who want to make something, but keep stopping themselves because they do not know where to start, or because what they make will not be good enough, or because it feels self-indulgent, or because what is even the point? She says. Start so small it almost embarrasses you. One sentence, one photograph, 1 minute of humming something you made up, one planted seed, one painted square. she says. The voice that says, "That is not enough," is the same voice from Part 5. The lying voice. The one that tells you you are not good enough. The one you have already learned not to trust. That voice does not get to decide whether your small creation counts. It counts. It always counts. Making something in a 5-minute window on a bad day is more valuable for your mental health than waiting for the perfect conditions that never arrive. The brain does not measure the size of what you made. It just registers that you made something. And that registration, that quiet signal that says, "I created today. I added something. I was here. I made this," is healing. In the most real, most unglamorous, most beautifully ordinary way. The final part is next. Part 12. And it is the reason this entire book was written. Jenny says there is one thing she wants you to leave with. One thing above everything else she has shared. It is not a tool. It is not a trick. It is a truth. And it is the most important one in the entire book. Part 12 is next. And it might be the part you needed most. Chapter 12. You are going to be okay. You made it to the final part. And before we begin, that matters. Whether you watched every part or skipped to this one. Whether you are having a good day or one of the hardest you have had in a long time. Whether you feel hopeful right now or completely exhausted. You are here. And being here counts. Jenny Lawson ends her book with the most important thing she has to say. Not a productivity tip. Not a coping strategy. Not a system or a framework. Just a truth. You are going to be okay. And this entire book was written to prove it. Jenny has been here too. There is something you need to understand about Jenny Lawson before you hear what she says in this final section. She is not writing from a place of having arrived. She is not writing from the other side of the struggle, looking back with comfortable distance at someone she used to be. She is still in it, still living with depression that does not always respond to treatment, still living with anxiety that makes ordinary things feel unreasonably hard, still having bad days, still having weeks where getting up is genuinely the full achievement, still surviving herself. And she says, she has done that. She has survived herself. Again and again and again. Through the darkest chapters. Through the times when she genuinely did not know how she was going to get through. Through the hospitalizations. Through the treatments that did not work. Through the years when she could not see any version of the future that felt okay. She survived. Not because she was stronger than most people. Not because she had some secret that others did not. Because she kept going. One day at a time. Sometimes 1 hour. Sometimes 1 minute. But she kept going. And she is still here. Writing books that reach millions. Running a bookshop that gives people a place to belong. Making things. Finding her people. Sharing the hard times. Being imperfectly, stubbornly, persistently. Okay. Just get to tomorrow. One of the most important ideas in this final section is also one of the simplest. Jenny says, sometimes the goal is not to feel better. Sometimes the goal is not to fix anything. Sometimes the goal is not to implement a new system, or practice self-compassion, or celebrate a small win. Sometimes the goal is simply to get to tomorrow. Just tomorrow. Not next week. Not the future. Not the version of life that feels possible on the good days. Just tomorrow. Because tomorrow is another chance. Another window. Another opportunity for things to be even slightly different. And slightly different is enough. Jenny says she has spent many nights with that as the only goal. Just get through tonight. Just make it to morning. Just be here when tomorrow arrives. And she says, every single time, tomorrow came, and it was not always better immediately. Sometimes it took longer. Sometimes the bad days stretched into bad weeks. But the chapter ended. It always ended. Because chapters always end. Even the ones that feel like they never will. Bad chapters end. This is something Jenny says with great conviction. In the middle of a hard chapter, it can feel permanent. It can feel like this is just how things are now. Like the darkness has stopped being temporary and has become the new normal. Like you will feel this way forever. And Jenny says she has felt that exact feeling. The certainty that this time it will not pass. This time is different. This time the chapter is not going to end. And every single time she has felt that, she has been wrong. The chapter ended. Not the way she expected. Not always when she hoped. Not always painlessly. But it ended. And something came after it. Something she could not have seen from inside the hardest part. Jenny says one of the most useful things she has ever learned is to remind herself when she is in a dark chapter that she has been in dark chapters before, and she has always, eventually, come out on the other side, not unchanged, not the same person she was before, but out, and still here, still creating, still connecting, still surviving. The evidence of her own past survival is the most convincing argument she has that she will survive the current one, and she offers that same argument to you. If you have survived hard things before, you have evidence. Evidence that you are someone who gets through. Evidence that the chapter ended last time, and it will end this time too. What okay actually looks like. Here is something Jenny is honest about. Okay does not look the same for everyone, and for someone living with treatment-resistant depression or severe anxiety, okay might not look the way most people imagine it. It might not be thriving. It might not be happy every day. It might not be free from hard moments. It might not be what people mean when they say they are doing well. For Jenny, okay looks like having more good days than bad ones, being able to work, being present for the people she loves, laughing genuinely at the things that are actually funny, making things, showing up, living, imperfectly, inconsistently, with plenty of bad days still woven in, but living. And she says, that is enough. That is okay. Not the dictionary definition, not the postcard version. The real version, the one available to a real human brain, that has to work harder than most to get there. That okay is worth fighting for. It is worth all the tools and tricks and systems and small steps and therapy and medication and asking for help and celebrating small things and finding your people and making something. All of it is worth it for that version of okay. The proof is in the book. Jenny says something very quietly at the end of this section. She says, if you are reading this, or watching this, and wondering whether okay is possible for you, this book is the answer. Not because it is a magic solution. Not because it contains the one thing that will fix everything. But because the person who wrote it has been exactly where you are. And is still here, still creating, still sharing, still surviving. The fact that this book exists is proof that the person who needed every single tool in it found enough of them to keep going, to build a life that has beauty in it, that has connection, that has laughter, real laughter, the kind that happens on bad days too. The kind that proves that hard and joyful can exist in the same life, in the same person, at the same time. Jenny is proof. And she is not exceptional. She is just someone who kept going, and learned along the way what helped, and then wrote it all down, so you could use it too. This is not the end. Jenny closes her book with a reminder. Not a summary. Not a list of takeaways. A reminder: the tools in this book are not for when things get better. They are for right now. For today. For this hard chapter. For the days when nothing is okay. Sleep. Work on easy mode. Celebrate the small things. Question your brain when it lies to you. Be kind to yourself. Share the hard times. Focus with what you have. Build systems instead of waiting. Find your people. Make something. And when all else fails, just get to tomorrow. Because tomorrow you can try again. With everything you have. Or with whatever you have left. It does not have to be much. It just has to be something. And something is always enough to begin. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not doing life wrong. You are a person with a brain that makes some days harder than they should be. And you are still here. Still watching. Still trying. Still looking for the tools that help. And that refusal to stop looking, is the most important thing. It is the thing that Jenny Lawson has in common with every person who has ever read her work. The refusal to give up. Even on the days when everything says there is no point. You are going to be okay. Not because it will be easy, but because you are still here. And still here is everything. If this series meant something to you, please like this video. Share it with one person who needs to hear this today. Subscribe to Bookverse, because there are more books coming. More tools. More honest conversations. For every kind of brain. And for every kind of hard day. We will see you in the next one.